Now, this is where I will be talking about my experience, because what I wanted to do is just give basically a background on what the ICC is, why they're known as a cult, what is a cult, and why the whole thing to begin with is just awful. So today I will be talking about 3 people specifically who are part of the ICC. One, she's a female and she's called Hannah. She is in her late 20s. The second one is Stallion, who is in his mid to late 20s. And Solomon, who I'm also assuming is in his mid to late 20s. Now, I am talking about them 3 because they are practically leading people astray. They might not see it now, but soon enough they will. So Hannah started her journey with the ICC in 2019. Stallion started his over 3 years ago, and Solomon, I'm not completely sure, but I'm pretty sure it was between 4 to 5 years ago he started his journey with ICC, and I will give information as to how I found out all of this. So initially I was a bit iffy about naming them, because one thing I don't like is when people give out too much information about people that needs to remain private. But since they went out of their way to basically target and prey on vulnerable Christians, I don't really care anymore. I will name for doing what you thought was the Lord's work, and it's absolutely not. It's the complete opposite. And so yes, I will put up their Instagrams so that if you ever see their handles and they ever go out of their way to invite you for a Bible study, just know you are being invited into a cult. The reason why I listed their names, and I could list other people's names, but I'm only listing theirs because they are what the ICC called guests. So basically, guests are people who lead others, but they're also guests that believe that they are not truly saved disciples of Christ. Whatever that means, take that as you will. But again, nothing of the sort makes sense. So I'm going to start with how I was recruited. So I was recruited initially 4 years ago by Hannah, and this was in 2021. So I came out of my favorite convenience store called So Plaza. I highly recommend. The one I typically go to is the one in Tottenham Court Road. And so I came out of there, and during this time it was COVID, and I came out of the convenience store and I saw her with a group of girls. Again, mind my own business, kept walking. Then she stopped me in my tracks, and the first thing she said when she saw me was, are you Blasian? Because apparently I look like I'm half Asian. I don't see it, but she said that I look like I am half Asian. I said no, I said I'm Congolese, and then she proceeded to ask me if I was a Christian. I said yes, and I thought she was an evangelist, so I wanted to stop her in her tracks and just tell her, yeah, I go to a church. It's in London. I already have my own church that I go to. And so yeah, and then I think she asked me for my Instagram at that point, because I don't think I saw her for a while until then. And so she had my Instagram, because I definitely wasn't going to give her my number, and she had like spoken to me, and it was all nice, you know, it was fine. And then I think she invited me to come to a couple of events, but the only event around that period of time that I actually did go to was a hot pot, which was in a very weird area, might I add, but it was with her and another group of girls that I did not know, and it was quite fun. I did enjoy myself. The second time, I'm pretty sure she invited me to go to a plethora of events, but the second event that I did go to was at I thought it was her place, and it was to watch a movie with her and her friends. And I asked her initially, like, are there mainly girls? Because I'm not going to go into her house if there's like a bunch of guys there. Like, it's just not gonna happen. She said there are mainly girls there, and it was true. She didn't lie. There were mainly girls at the residence again, but it wasn't hers. It was someone else's. But she did live quite close to. She basically lived in the same vicinity as that person. And so yeah, I enjoyed myself. Since then, she has consistently contacted me on socials, on Instagram specifically, and I felt badgered by her, which is why a lot of times I was choosing to ignore her, because one, I'm not chronically online, and two, I didn't like her enough to want to continuously communicate with her. That's just the honest truth. That's how I felt. But because she was so persistent in talking to me and wanting to make a relationship with me, this year, I think, yes, it was this year, when she invited me to go to one event for faith and arts discussion, that is when I decided to come. But before then, I had only met her twice, and that was it. Yes, so I just also want to add, the reason why I felt more inclined to speak to her is because when, like, obviously when you're on Instagram, you can see who your mutuals are, and there was one person in particular who I knew that she was mutuals with, and that was someone I had met previously, and so I felt more comfortable in attending events that she offered me because I knew someone that she did know. So with the faith and art discussions, I'm pretty sure I attended at least 3, maximum 3, and within those faith and art discussions, I actually pretty enjoyed myself. I felt like I was in a group full of bright, intelligent, creative people. However, there were things about the study that I didn't particularly like and that I wasn't fond of. There was this one guy in particular who I felt like was flirting with me, only because of the way he would stare at me. Like, he was holding on to my gaze with everything that I said, and it was quite intense, and I didn't know how to take it, because typically when a guy does like me or he's interested in me, they act the way that he does. And so I wasn't sure if he was just a passionate person, because he seemed to be doing it. It didn't seem like he was just doing it to everybody. It felt very intentional with the way that he was looking at me. He made also a plethora of comments that I found a bit weird and a bit odd for someone that he's only just met. If I wasn't clear enough, the person that I was referring to is Stelly. So what irritated me the most about the faith and art discussions was 2 things. One, sometimes they would take videos and pictures of the people who were in the event. I didn't like that they never asked me once if I was comfortable with that, or if I was comfortable with them releasing any of the images or footages. And I'm letting you now know, just in case you didn't get it before, if any of those images or footages that you have of me while I was in your events get released at any point in time to promote your cult, I will be taking legal actions. I'll be pressing charges if I have to. I really will. I don't play with that. Next, the other thing that I didn't like was the love bombing, and I felt it throughout the conversation. So every single time someone would say anything, it was like this over enthusiastic, oh, we need to cheer you on, we need to kind of rejoice in whatever it is that you're saying. It was quite odd to me, because that's not necessary, and I guess I wasn't used to being in an environment where everyone is so overtly positive that I questioned whether I was just being cynical, or if my understanding was that it was inauthentic. And obviously it was proven to be true, because it was inauthentic, because there was an underlining agenda behind it. The issue that I had with the guy Stelly in particular was that, again, I felt like he was being quite flirtatious with me for a number of reasons. But the thing that actually irked me the most was the second time we met, we came back. Also, this is where they typically this is where their Bible studies are typically located. So it's at the Hilton Hotel, that's basically not far from the Farringdon station. On our way back after the second time I went to their event for the faith and art discussion, we were walking down, and I remember him out of nowhere just starting to play fight with me. Honestly, I didn't feel like we built a relationship where he could feel comfortable to start play fighting with me. I don't think I ever insinuated that I was cool with him placing any moves on me like that, and because I wasn't play fighting back, I felt like it was even more obvious that I wasn't entertained by whatever he was doing. Now after that, what made it worse for me and what made my judgment of him, I was now very skeptical of him, was when out of nowhere, after he stopped play fighting with me, he out of nowhere swooped his hand under mine, clutched it, and I had to push it away, and I acted like nothing happened at all. But in my mind, I was thinking that this guy is very weird. What was also important to note was that one time I had a conversation with him, and he, I guess, made a joke or something. I'm paraphrasing, but he was like, oh, you've never come to my church or whatever. And I said I had my own church. And he was like, what? I didn't know that. And I was like, okay, well, you obviously heard me speak. I'm biblically literate. What made you think that I didn't have my own church that I went to? And he was like, oh, I didn't know. And I was like, okay, so why didn't you ask? And he was like, oh, I don't know. And I found that very odd. And it made me more skeptical of everyone in the group too, because I'm just like, why would you not ask if the people who are participating in your events have their own churches or not? Why assume that they don't? Very odd and very weird. No, aside from the love bombing and relentless championing that he was giving me, that raised alarm bells in my head that something was not completely right. We also had one other conversation, and it was about, I think he mentioned something about hugging and side hugging females only to keep the purity. And I'm aware that with the ICC they have very strict purity rules for the men and females, but before I knew of that, I found it very weird with the way that he was saying it, because he kept saying like, oh yeah, it's to keep the peace and the purity between us, because you know, you're a woman and I'm a man and I don't want you to get the wrong idea. I already did get the wrong idea, you know, and it was because of your actions and it was because of your words. But aside from, you know, the side hug thing, I don't know why, but the way he said it was like I needed to reward him or be like, oh my gosh, that's amazing, you do side hugs towards females. You're supposed to do that. What do you mean? Like, it's not something to be rewarded for. It's not something to gush over. Being a gentleman towards a female is basic. Is basic. I just got that vibe like I was supposed to reward him for saying that, and I'm not going to. That's why when he said it, I was like, okay, and because it means absolutely nothing to me. Men are supposed to be gentlemanly. They're supposed to be chivalrous towards females. They're supposed to protect them. They're supposed to be courteous towards females. They're not supposed to touch them in any way that they're not supposed to. So him saying that made absolutely no sense to me. I don't know, it's just the way he said it made me feel weird, like I was supposed to reward him. I don't know. Now moving on back to Hannah, the person who recruited me. Also, I didn't say this earlier, but through the faith and art discussions is where I met Solomon. Now in one of the the second faith and art discussion I went to was when I was told that it was Solomon's farewell and that he'd be creating his own art and faith discussion elsewhere. Yes, and so that was when, and I found it odd because there was a discussion where Stellian said that, Stellian, he bought pizzas for everyone, and I think around that time I only had 2 slices of pepperoni pizza and there was 1 left on the plate, and someone else wanted it, and I said, okay, well, you can have it, it's fine, I'm not bothered. And then he was like, no, I can have it because I'm the guest. And at this point I didn't feel like I was a guest because I had now become accustomed to everyone there, and more than that, if anyone's a guest, it's Solomon, because he's the person that's he's the person that they're saying farewell to. So out of everyone, he deserves the slice more. So I found it odd. I don't know, there was something about it that made me feel weird. With the Bible studies, I want to say I attended 2, but let's say 2.5, because the first time I remember Hannah speaking to me and telling me about having a Bible study with her. It was going to be at her house, and I've been to her house. I think, no, I hadn't been to her house before, but I thought I did, because again, it's the same place where I had gone to watch the movie that time she invited me previously before. And so I was late to this first Bible study, and that was where I met all the girls that lived under her roof. And majority of these girls are in uni aside from one person. Now, what was strange about this quote-unquote Bible study, again, it wasn't really necessarily a Bible study, nor is the whole thing a Bible study, because it's a way to basically indoctrinate me. But yeah, so when I was there, one of the first things we did after eating, because she prepared a meal for everyone, she said, okay, we're all going to start telling our testimonies. And I found that a bit weird, because I don't necessarily need to hear someone's testimony in order for me to connect with them. So again, but I let it slide. But one thing that I really felt like my alarm bells were like going up was because their testimonies were a bit too detailed, and they were like detailed from like the very beginning to like the very end to like their present day life. And I felt like that was really weird, because even with testimonies, regardless of whether they're Christian or not, you have to be careful with what you say. I'm always careful with what I say when it comes to my testimony anyway. I'm not going to say anything that I feel like no one should hear, or I'd want kept to myself, because again, people like to take advantage of people's testimonies, and there are many monitoring spirits. So I found it weird that they were so quick to elaborate on everything that had gone on in their lives, and obviously I didn't do the same, but I just found it very weird. And also, I already made a testimony video. So with the actual Bible studies that I had with Hannah, from the very beginning, the Bible studies were supposed to be personable to me, to help me with the issues that I'd been facing, but they actually weren't. They weren't personable at all. I know that because we started off with the most basic introductions into Christianity, and for me it honestly irritated me and it irked me, because I felt like I had so many profound theological conversations with her to know that I am not a baby Christian. I did not just enter into Christianity, so I didn't like being talked to like as if I just entered Christianity. And so that's how the Bible studies went on. Like, we started from seeking God and going through scripture and but every single time we'd finish a scripture, she would say something along the lines of, so are you ready to give this up for God? Are you ready to do this? And obviously I'd say yes, but in my head I'm thinking, as Christians, we already know what to do. This is not like, it's not rocket science. So I just found it, I don't know, I just felt weird about it. But I was just like, why am I having to submit to things that I'm already submitting to? And it made me question whether this submission was actually towards God, or it was to her own sort of discipleship training that she was trying to indoctrinate me with. I constantly felt patronized by her. Like, I remember even after the first time we finished our Bible study, I told my sister, and I felt like my intelligence was being mocked. I told my friends, why is my intelligence being mocked? Why am I being treated like this? I don't understand it. I don't like it. My own pastors don't do this to me. No one speaks to me like this. I did not understand it. It made me feel very familiar to something that I had experienced once before, because last summer there was this girl who was on Instagram who goes to my uni, and she asked me if I wanted to go to do a Bible study with her. And so I said yes. And in that Bible study, I found out she wasn't the one that was leading it, but it was someone else. And it was through that Bible study that I also felt patronized, because she was making me feel like I didn't know enough about the Bible. And it was weird. And then she was also kind of lecturing me about my time schedule, like she's in my house, like she understands my household. It was very weird. And that Bible study didn't even like after the first one, I basically said, bro, I'm out. I don't like the way I was being spoken to. There's something weird about it. There's something spiritually wrong. And I was starting to feel like the same sort of feeling. And I was just like, why is this so familiar? Back to Hannah, what I didn't like was that throughout the Bible studies, there was a constant desire for her to validate every single thing that I was saying. Like every single time she'd be like, oh, well done. And I'm like, I don't need to hear the well done. No one does that to me. No one has to validate what I'm saying. You can just be like, that's a good word. Let's move on. Oh, this is what I took from what you said. Da-da-da-da-da. There doesn't need to be a congratulations like she's speaking to a child. That's the thing. I kept feeling like she was treating me like I was a baby Christian, like I just entered the faith. And that's what I didn't like. And it made me feel very, very suspicious of her. I was very suspicious of her before, but again, my spidey senses were tingling even more. Throughout the Bible study, it seemed like there was this constant need for me to submit to her. And one example I will give was when she asked if I could do the S.O.A.P Method, which is basically like a way to study the Bible. I already have my own method. I use the Martin Luther method. I also look at commentary, and I remember when I mentioned that, she was like, oh, you have to be careful with commentary. And I was like, yes, you have to be careful, and I'm going to use the Holy Spirit to give me discernment on whether I should take in what this person is saying or not, and I will examine whether or not it's biblical or not. But again, I wasn't too worried about it. And when I told her, I remember she instructed me to use the S.O.A.P method, and I didn't. And she was just like, oh, like, you know, since we're doing this, like, you have to be willing to try it out to at least see da-da-da-da-da. I'm going to be honest, I never tried it out because it's not that similar from the Martin Luther method, but there are cons about the S.O.A.P method that I feel like needs to change, because sometimes I feel like it makes the Bible study seem a bit redundant because it's so simple in a sense. Like, it's too simple to the point that it doesn't feel spiritually challenging. I felt like I was being spiritually stilted when I was doing the Bible studies with her, and I still don't believe that the S.O.A.P method is the ultimate best method. And just because it works for you does not mean that it will do wonders for my life. Everyone is different, and there are always different methods that will work for other people. But I didn't understand what was this infatuation with the S.O.A.P method.